Killer's Creed contains adult themes and violence. It is not intended for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised. Hello and welcome to the first episode of Killer's Creed, a show that reveals plots, death, and gore. On this show, I'm going to share with you an audio version of the book of Dr. Emma Southon. A Fatal Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum, a book that talks about murder in ancient Rome. Let's start this show the easiest, most joyful way. But hey, it's going to be hella crazy. Picture the scene. An idyllic hill in central Italy. A group of men sit, silently watching the afternoon sky. In the distance, though easily within sight. On another hill, are another group. These men are all shepherds and followers of twins who had risen from nowhere, to kill the king of Alba Longa and seize the throne for their own, declaring themselves as the sons of Mars. Under their rule, Alba Longa had welcomed fugitives and runaway slaves and vagabonds of all stripes until it had grown so large that the twins had decided to found themselves a city. And here they reached for the first time in their lives, a point of irreconcilable conflict. For reasons unclear, the city had to be named after only one twin. The other would have to submit to his brother. Neither willing to back down, they agreed to let the gods decide between them by sending an omen. The omen they requested was vultures, and now, they with their followers, sat, waiting and watching, glowering across the valley. You already know the names of these twins, Romulus and Remus. After God knows how long, a cry went up from the Aventine hill where Remus and his pals waited. 6 vultures had appeared. A sign. The gods favored Remus as the founder of the new city. Elated, he set out with his closest allies to the Palatine Hill where his brother Romulus was grimly waiting. Remus gave his news to Romulus, but at that moment another sign appeared. 12 vultures flew over the Palatine. The gods had decided that Romulus would be the founder. Each group hailed their preferred twin as the chosen king. Both groups began building their city. Tensions rose. Eventually, in an act of ultimate contempt, Remus leapt over one of the rising city walls on the Palatine, inciting Romulus into an uncontrollable fury. He attacked his brother and stabbed him to death and declared, unrepentant, that this was what would happen to anyone who ever breached his walls. And thus, in murder, Rome was founded. By 510 BCE, Rome was a flourishing city under the king Tarquinius Superbus. Something however was rotten in the state of Rome, and another act of violence soon changed everything. Tarquinius' son Sextus Tarquinius raped an aristocratic woman named Lucretia. Lucretia responded by calling a family meeting, explaining what had happened and then driving a knife into her own heart. Her family saw this as honorable and praiseworthy in the extreme, and full of righteous rage and grief, they took her to the forum and displayed her body as that of a murder victim. They demanded Tarquinius and his son to be overthrown and exiled. The people of Rome agreed and, with a remarkable unity of purpose, swiftly abolished the monarchy and established the Roman Republic. The Romans designed the Republic to deny power to individuals, and to prevent through the means of shared power, checks and balances, any single man from becoming a tyrant. It was the Romans' proudest achievement, and it was founded in the unjust death of a woman. The glorious Republic of Rome lasted 450 years, and the moment of its demise was also marked by murder. That moment came on the Ides of March 44 BCE when Rome's sole ruler entered the theater of Pompey and 40 of his friends administered 23 stab wounds, leaving Julius Caesar, the perpetual dictator of Rome and proto-emperor, bleeding to death on the floor of the entrance hall, and opening the path for his 19-year-old great-nephew Octavian to become the glorious, deified Emperor Augustus. Whenever there was a transformative moment in Roman history, there was a murder. A person dies, usually bloodily, and in the space where they once lived, something entirely new emerged. Rome was built on the blood of Remus. The Republic was born from the death of Lucretia. The empire grew from the assassination of Caesar. For most of Roman history, murder was not a crime. The Romans not only had no legislation prohibiting murder, they had no word for murder. Even though so many words in Latin that mean to kill are often translated as murder. And for all of Roman history, killing in the gladiatorial arena was a literal sport. The symbol of the Roman state was the fasces, a bundle of sticks containing an axe. The sticks represented the power of the state to beat its citizens, and the axe represented its right to kill them. The fasces were carried by guards known as lictors who accompanied all Roman officials whenever they left their houses, so the message was never forgotten. Few other societies have reveled in and revered the deliberate and purposeful killing of men and women as much as the Romans. The Romans were frankly weird about it. But then, we as a Western society are also weird about murder. We absolutely love it. We consume it with a passion. Right now, in the US and the UK, 1 in every 3 books purchased is a crime novel, which inevitably opens with a pretty woman found dead. The crime novelist James Patterson has been the world's best-selling author for about 5 years. The amount of money he makes a year knocking out thrillers about gruesome murders is so enormous that my brain can't comprehend it. 18 of which are about a women's murder club. The joint biggest-selling English-language author of all time is Agatha Christie, selling between 2 and 4 billion copies of her murder mystery novels. But it's not all fiction. True crime is also booming. In 2014, the podcast serial, about the murder of a high school student, was downloaded 40 million times in 3 months, and things have only got better for murder podcasts and associated media from there. You, dear listener, have picked up a show called Killer's Creed, which promises, and will deliver, lots of good death and gore. I'm not judging though. I made this show because I love murder too. I was a serial fanatic. I am an Agatha Christie obsessive. I am fascinated by murder. I'll talk about my many serial killer opinions a lot if you listen to me for long enough. Our Western obsession with murder as a titillating and enormously entertaining outlier makes us extremely odd in the grand cultural scheme of things. No other society has built media empires on such mountains of dead and mutilated women. But, to us, the Romans look like the weird ones, because they were fascinated by murder in a different way. We have our mountains of dead fictional girls. But they had mountains of dead real men. Murder was a very literal sport. They took enslaved men and prisoners of war, forcing them to fight one another in an arena until one dies violently in front of a screaming crowd of highly entertained people. Regularly, this was the number 2 sport in Rome. Number 1. Horse racing, and it somewhat skewed how Romans perceived murder in the rest of their lives, along with how they viewed the fundamental notions of life and death, and what it means to be a human. The Romans also had an institutionalized domestic and utterly pervasive form of slavery that is hard to get your head around as a modern person who believes that every person is equal. Enslaved men, women and children were everywhere in Rome. Aristocratic homes had hundreds of people living in them who had been enslaved by the Romans. Even poorer homes might have had one enslaved member of the household. The Roman state ran on the labor of enslaved men, doing the administrative and physical labor necessary to run a huge empire and build massive marble buildings covered in pretty paintings every 400 yards. No inhabitant of Rome went without contact with enslaved persons, and no one ever questioned it. No Roman ever looked at their slaves and at their freed slaves who remained part of their household and thought, "Hang on a minute, these are people." Instead, they treated these men, women and children with whom they shared their houses as though they were chairs. Things that could be abused and kicked and disposed of without for the most part any consequence. And everyone agreed that that was fine and normal and right. And that also rather messed with their notions of right and wrong and life and death too. What is murder? I suspect that everyone thinks they know what murder is, but I also suspect that most people don't, really. Until I started researching this show. I, like you, probably, used murder and homicide interchangeably. It turns out that they are not the same thing. Homicide is the act of killing someone under any circumstances. Any time a human kills another person, that's a homicide. Some of those are legal, such as the death penalty in the 100 countries that still have capital punishment laws. That's 100 countries in which one person can inject another person with poison or shoot them or hang them by the neck, fully intending to kill them with the support of the state. Soldiers killing one another on a battlefield or with a big drone is another form of legal homicide. As a soldier, You can try your hardest to kill as many people as possible and get nothing but medals and complex PTSD in return. But most forms of homicide are illegal, and there are lots of them. The lowest forms are called involuntary manslaughter in English and US law, and culpable homicide in Scottish law, and a bunch of other things in other places. They are incidents where maybe the perpetrator didn't mean to kill that other person but still someone died and it was that other person, but still someone died and it was definitely their fault. This is for when parents accidentally leave their babies in hot cars or healthcare workers accidentally give the wrong drug. Then there's voluntary manslaughter. This is when you meant to hurt the victim but not to kill them. Maybe you meant to punch them in a fight but when they went down they cracked their head and died. Maybe you were provoked and lost control. Maybe there is diminished responsibility because you were really high or in the middle of a psychotic episode. After all these, comes murder. Murder is defined in England and Wales as where a person of sound mind unlawfully kills any reasonable creature in being, alive and breathing through its own lungs, under the Queen's peace, with intent to kill or cause grievous bodily harm. All 6 conditions have to be met in order for a homicide to be considered a murder in an English court. In Scotland, simply intent and wicked recklessness are required. In American federal law, murder is the unlawful killing of a human being with malice aforethought. I bet you never knew that murder laws had such lovely turns of phrase. Americans like to complicate this further by separating murder into first and second degrees, and then adding extra complications by letting each state decide what constitutes first and second degree murder. Generally, first-degree murder is intentional murder that has been premeditated or planned, while second-degree murder is intentional but unplanned. So, if I go out and buy a gun and then go to someone's house and shoot them, that's first-degree murder. If I am Ted Bundy and I am pretending that I hurt my arm so a woman will help me lift my canoe up so I can beat her to death with a hammer while she's not looking, that's first-degree murder. I planned that. However, if I am arguing with someone and then I pull out my gun in the middle of the fight and shoot them, that's second-degree murder. Some states also have third-degree murder, which covers all forms of manslaughter. In New York State, first-degree murder only refers to the murder of police officers, multiple murders, murders involving torture or being a paid assassin. So if I buy a gun and drive to someone's house and kill them in Glenville, New York, that's second-degree murder unless I am being paid or they are a cop. But, if I did that same thing in Pottsville, Pennsylvania, that would be first-degree murder. If I did it in Lansing, UK, it would just be murder. Furthermore, I'd be liable for the death penalty in Pennsylvania, but not in New York because only capital first-degree federal murders are death penalty murders in New York State. Which means, in Pennsylvania, a second homicide could occur as a result of the murder, this time in a nice state-sanctioned cell. What I'm pointing at here is that murder is a constructed act. The only black and white part of a murder is the bit where one person killed another, and that's actually the homicide bit. Homicide is clear-cut, but murder is a label we apply to some forms of homicide, and that label changes over time and across space. What is clearly murder in one state is manslaughter in another. What is legal homicide to one person is obviously murder to another. Murder is the interpretation of an event, interpreted by individual people, which makes murder an emotive label, no matter how much legalese it is couched in. It is not a binary category. It is not a single or simple descriptor. Murder is complicated. The sociologist Douglas Black once said, "Right and wrong is not absolute or relative, it is geometrical." This is why I have used a very comprehensive definition of murder to include basically all killing. Rightness and wrongness are products of social space, where gender, status, race, location, means, time, wealth, and infinite other variables that shift and move and come together to create rightness and wrongness that are never static. Because of this, I have interpreted the concept of murder very, very broadly. And I want you to keep all that in mind as we jump into the world of Roman homicide.